there are videos and other things. I will also show you
Yes, sir.
something
Yes.
in software. All right.
Yes, sir.
So let's see types of control systems.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes,
Sorry to
yes,
interrupt you,
yes.
sir. Sir, like, can you tell us like what would be the marks distribution between the tests and the assignments, like from your part, 50 marks part that you said earlier?
Who told mine is 50 marks? I am teaching more. I may take 70 marks, 75 marks. Okay, there is
Sir,
no limit.
you
Okay.
told initially, sir. Okay, sir.
But I am still teaching. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there are different types of control systems in electrical and in chemical and so on. Their control systems are different. We will talk about our mechanical control systems. So we have three kinds of control systems. One will be called passive control, semi-active control.
Sir, did you share the screen? Like we are not able to see.
Oh, are you able to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have three kinds of control systems. As per different classifications are there. So there might be classifications like linear control, nonlinear control. There is also something like basic control, modern control, advanced control, and so on. There is no boundary between them. There is also frequency domain control, state space control, and so on. So different kinds of classifications are there. One kind of classification is in terms of devices is passive control, semi-active control, and active control. Okay. So these three are there. In passive control, no external energy, external power is provided. All right. So sensors may not be present. And actuator is a part of the system. All right. That is what is a passive control. For example, door closer. It's basically a device which is attached to the door. This is door. To the door hinge, there is a torsional damper. Torsion spring and damper. That is a hydraulic device. And it's connected as a, here it is hinged, here also it is hinged. So that will provide a force and it will slow down the motion of the door. If you open it, it will not close suddenly. It will close and it will close slowly. That is a door closer is a passive control. Let's say you have a toilet system. It's not system, it's called cistern. I have cistern. Even cistern becomes system. A cistern is also a system. So what you have? You have this thing where you have water. This water, you have a bulb. This is called float. Float is hollow inside that air. It's a plastic thing. Right. Then you have a lever. This lever is hinged somewhere. It's an extension from this plastic box, let's say. And you have, let's say, a valve. And here is your supply line, water supply. So as this float moves up because of water filling in, this valve moves down and it closes the water inlet to the cistern. And when this float is down here, then this valve is open. All right. So you don't require any external power. There is no sensor. That sensor float itself is the sensor. The actuator is the valve, which is part of the system. So everything is part of the system. You don't provide any external power to it. And no battery is required. So this is a passive system. Let's say in a vehicle, let's say this is vehicle, mass of vehicle by 4, quarter car. In this, you have a spring, you have a damper, then you have unsprung mass, axle and so on, axle, differential and whatever are there. Then you have tire. And this is ground excitation. Now in this, what we can do is between unsprung mass and this, we can put another spring. Let's say we take a lever arrangement. This is a lever. Somewhere, let's say. Then you have one thing here, and then here onwards, you have a spring which is connected here. So what happens when this mass moves up? This will go down. This delta is the gap. After delta gap, another spring becomes active. So what you are doing? Changing the effective stiffness. Is based on some deflection. All right, no external power is required. This is again a passive suspension. This is a passive suspension. Passive suspension with a control. With a control. All right. So whenever you have something passive, you don't require any external sensor, you don't require any actuator, you don't external power. Sensors, actuator and external power are not required in a passive system. So what we don't read? Sensor, actuator, external power and controller, of course, are not needed in passive control. But required in semi-active and active control. So now let us move to fully active control. The semi-active is somewhere in between. I will come back to it later. So let's go to active control. Same vehicle, let's say active suspension. So what do we do? Same kind of thing. Same of mass of vehicle by 4. Assuming the load is distributed equally on four wheels. Then let's say we have a piezo stack. Then of course damper. Then unsprung mass, Mu. Then of course tire, Kt. And we will require a sensor. We have a sensor. This position or velocity or whatever. Let's say position sensor. We take that to a controller. And then we apply a voltage across this. This is voltage. So some kind of voltage is applied on this. This piezo stack is actuator. So now actuator draws full power from external source. Where is that external source? This external source is this voltage supply. Obviously, we require a voltage supply. Okay? Battery or whatever. Needs a sensor. Sensor and controller are present. Okay, so that is what is a fully active suspension. What holds this vehicle at certain height? It is this piezo stack. There is no external spring. This piezo stack is completely lifting the vehicle. Wherever it is there, it is given by full power is provided by this piezo stack. Okay. So obviously you understand lot of power is required. So lot of power is required. A semi-active suspension or semi-active control is somewhere in between. What it does is it reduces the power requirement. That's it. It reduces the power requirement by some ingenious change in the design. Let's say semi-active suspension control. Obviously, we are controlling vehicle height, height from the ground clearance, or maybe ride height or something. So what we do here is we have this mass of vehicle by 4, the damper as usual. This also can be made active and semi-active. Then let's say we have a air chamber. As usual, rest of the things, mass of unsprung mass, tire stiffness, ground excitation. This is air chamber. Basically an air spring. Air spring. Now here let's put a valve and connect this valve to an accumulator. All right. As usual, velocities are sensed. Okay, this velocity sensed or displacement, whatever, displacement sensed. Then you have controller. Some reference and other things I will handle later. And this controller just opens and closes the valve. Adjusts valve opening. What do we know? The spring stiffness for this pressure is equal to minus beta del V by B, or K equivalent is equal to beta by B. If B is small, K is large, B is large, K is small. All right. So this air spring, if I open this valve completely, the two volumes, okay, let's say this is B accumulator, this is B of, let's say, suspension. Okay. So V, we can write V suspension less than equal to B less than equal to B A plus B S. So we can change B, V can be varied between Vs and Va plus Bs. So we can effectively change the stiffness of the suspension. All right, this is a very basic design. It's not that simple. Some other parts are there, but in simple terms, what is our power consumption? Our power consumption now is just to open and close the valve. So what is difference? Very little power is consumed. Is consumed to open or close the valve.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, but we also need to put up a pump or something, right, to transfer the air from accumulator to VS or something of that sort.
Not required. Not required. Not required. Not required. Okay, both can be at same pressure. Right. If you need a pump, then that becomes active. Okay. If you need a pump, then you will have a two-channel thing. You have your V accumulator. Okay. There is a valve. This is suspension. Our suspension. Then there is another valve. And this goes to atmosphere. Okay. So you can, sometimes you can give, this is connected to pump. So with pump, you can increase the pressure. When you have to decrease the pressure, you bleed it. Okay, throw it out to atmosphere. Okay. So that way you can have a fully active control. All right. Here we are simply closing and opening. That's all. No extra pump. We are changing the stiffness. Whereas there, your actuator will be able to provide any desired force. You can increase the force by pumping fluid from the accumulator, which is at a higher pressure. You can reduce the pressure by opening the valve and discharging the air to the atmosphere. All right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, in the first passive one, so it is similar to this, just the valve is always closed. Like we can think of that.
Nothing is changing. Nothing is changing. You don't need any sensor, actuator, nothing. All right. Everything is fixed. Right. Only thing is because of geometric configuration, something happens after some deformation or something. All right. You have a stopper-like thing. You can have a, let's say, after certain distance, you have a barrier that acts like a controller. You go and you cannot exceed. You will hit there. That's it. Okay. So that kind of a thing, which is prefabricated, cannot be you cannot change them. That is what is passive control. You cannot change them. Of course, you can change. Let's say in that sump system that I have drawn here, there is a. If you open your cistern, you will see there is a lead screw. With that lead screw, you can change this lever ratio of the float. Okay. Suppose if there is a leakage from your cistern, you can see if you increase that length of that float through lead screw, it will close quickly. All right. Somebody's microphone is on. Please switch it up. So the difference is, in passive, no extra power is provided. In active, full power, full actuation power has to be provided from the system source, external source, and in semi-active, you require little bit of power. So semi-active is best, but you cannot really design all things where you have semi-active suspension. So similar to this, yes.
I have just a point to make. A very simple example. That suppose a person is in a room, in a particular chair. So the difference between active and inactive control and semi-active control will be like the walls of the room prevent you from going out of the room, whereas an active control will be something when you try to go out of the room, it will again bring you back to your chair. That is the basic difference. If you look at in very, very physical terms. You have a limit on your motion and or displacement or whatever, but it need not bring it back. Bring you back to your original configuration. Is that?
Okay. So I am giving another example. Let's talk about steering. Okay, vehicle steering, four-wheel thing steering. Okay. So what we have there, usual vehicles. Now, of course, they are defunct. You don't have such kind of vehicles. Steering is directly connected. Your steering wheel, let's say. This is our steering wheel, and this is connected to a rack and pinion through a rack and pinion. Let's call it, let's say, some kind of rack and pinion. This thing, and here is a rack, and of course they go to wheels and so on. Okay, so you have a rack and pinion. So what happens when you try to turn this? What is trying to oppose this? This wheel is kept on the ground. Okay, wheel is on the ground. This wheel. When you are going to turn this, wheel, the frictional forces, these frictional forces will produce a moment here. So reaction moment is produced by reaction from frictional force. At wheel to ground. Okay. If your vehicle is lifted up on, let's say, the jacks, lifted up on the jacks and wheels are not in contact with the ground, you will see if you are sitting on the steering and you rotate it, you won't feel any reaction force. So this kind of a thing is passive steering. whatever Ackermann configuration you have studied is passive steering. Now, we will convert it to a semi-active steering. So what is semi-active? Semi-active steering. It's also called power assisted steering, power assisted or power steering. Now all vehicles have this kind of steering. Because if you have a big truck, the load is very heavy, and with your if you try to turn the steering, your friction force at the wheels will be so large that you won't be able to do much. Maybe in old days we required big Sardarjis to drive all kinds of full Punjab trucks. Now, of course, those are not necessary because we have power assisted steering. A child can do it. So what is that? You rotate your steering as usual. You rotate your steering as usual. But here, this rack and pinion, whatever rack and pinion is there. What it does is basically it goes to a large, this is a hydraulic line, this is a piston, this is a hydraulic chamber. So you apply on a big area, some force is applied on the hydraulic chamber. Now you take that and on the wheels, wherever we have Ackermann's this thing, this is our Ackermann pad. On this here, we apply that same force through an amplifier. How we amplify? We apply that same force through another rack and pinion or whatsoever, which is turned by a smaller area. Sorry, that is larger area. So we have further, sorry, this is smaller. Large displacement, this is large area. Large area. So you have this hydraulic fluid acting on a large area piston. Area. So if
but
this is area.
here,
Yes?
what is the minimum power expenditure from any source?
Which one? That is for the maintaining the pressure in the hydraulic line. That is pressure in maintaining the pressure in the hydraulic line. So you can mix both. I will show you how to do fully one. Sometimes they mix both. That is, they take part of the power from the driver, part of the power from the pump. All right. So the smaller area A1, this is, let's say, A2. So you have FA1, F1A1, this is F2A2. Basically, you have an amplification. So you have an amplification, but what you require is, you require more change here, more distance. Because this is a smaller area, to have same volume flow rate is B, let's say volume flow is B. So you require A times this distance is, let's say, x1. A1 x1 is equal to B, must be equal to A2 x2. X2 is small, this is large, this is small, A1 is small, so X1 is large. So that you adjust by a gear ratio. By gear ratio. Otherwise, you have to turn the wheel too many times. That you can adjust. So this is basically an amplification, so that the driver doesn't have to provide too much of effort. Okay, little bit of amplification is present there. Kind of a lever. Whereas if I go to fully active, or so-called fly-by-wire steering, so you have steering. Here nothing is there. There is a torsion spring. And angle sensor, basically a potentiometer or pot. So what you do, you rotate it, you give some rotation, let's say some torque you apply. So this spring is required to give you a feel. If you don't have a spring, you will think that my steering wheel is rotating, that wheel is not rotating. You will feel awkward that why no resistance is coming. So to give you that resistance, feeling of resistance, that torsion spring is there. And there is a sensor. So there is angle sensor. So some angle, let's say theta. So this theta comes here. Now this theta goes to controller. This is the desired theta. This is controller. Then you have a full actuator. That is hydraulic actuator. Exactly that piston cylinder kind of thing, or hydraulic pump or whatever. Now this drives your rack and pinion. There is a motor. That same hydraulic actuator. This one. This drives the rack and pinion. And of course, it goes to the wheels. So no direct contact. Between driver and wheels. Full power is given by motor. All right. Of course, for correction, some sensors and other things will come that I will discuss later. So conceptually, what is there? The driver rotates something which has nothing to do with actual steering, no way connected to steering. Something is measured from that, and accordingly power is provided by a motor which rotates the actual steering. That is a fully active system. All right. So you understand this fully active will take much more power. Previous one, a little bit of power to maintain the pressure in that hydraulic line, and the first one, full power from the driver. Okay, nothing comes from outside. So this is the basic difference. So now we will have various kinds of things in our course. In this course, fully active control will be taught. Okay, very basic and fully active control. And as I have told previously, we will deal with linear time invariant or LTI systems. All right. So what is this linear time invariant system? So let's take example. Linear systems we know. Let's say this mass spring, damper, let's say grounded. Ft, this is K, this is R. We have equation mx double dot plus kx plus rx dot is equal to Ft, which we can write in state space form. Okay, we have written P dot Q dot is equal to PQ 10, source of effort is Ft, and whatever comes here. So here will be R by M minus K 1 by M 0. So we have a state space form. We can write the equations in state space matrix form. State space matrix form. So that is a linear system. What happens if it is nonlinear? Say for that same system, there is something. This gives a force of damper is equal to some resistance R mod V B, and this gives a force F spring is equal to K mod X X. So both are nonlinear. So what do we have equation? Mx double dot minus R mod X dot minus K mod X X is equal to Ft. Remember that it has to be mod X, not Kx square. If you write Kx square, it is wrong, because if it is Kx square, then Fk versus X will become like this. This is wrong. Correct thing is this. This is correct. Positive side, negative side should be like this. Okay, you cannot have for positive X, if we are getting positive force, that is a restoring force. For negative F, you get again positive, then that will not work. That's not a spring. That's not restoring the thing. Same thing for the velocities. So this is equation. This cannot be written in state space form. This is nonlinear. The double pendulum that we did in the last class, we didn't consider the sine and cos of angles to be small. We had in the model full sine theta, cos theta, and all those things appearing. Obviously, that is also nonlinear. Those things we cannot write the equation of motion in state space matrix form. Though we can write it in state space functional form of the kind we can write that x dot is f. F is a function of x, u input, and y is a function g, x, t, u. This is functional form. But we cannot write it in state space matrix form. Okay, state space, this is functional form of in state space. But cannot be written in state space matrix form or matrix state space form, let's say. So you cannot write it in matrix. So that is what is nonlinear. So those kind of systems will not be there. Only linear systems will be there. And again, we are making another distinction that it has to be time invariant. Time invariant. Okay. So what is that time invariant? This means system parameters, not excitations. Or constraints cannot change over time. Okay? This is what it means. Means if you have a parameter k, k can be some constant, or instead of that you might have k mod x, that is a function of states, but that should not be an explicit function of time. That relation should not change over time. For example, let us say something like a swing. Let's say this is a swing. This is a swing, let's say. Okay? Swing. Let there be somebody sitting over that, holding both sides, and its legs. What do we do? Usually, we extend and contract legs to generate motion. When you are going further, if you want to go further, you make your legs fully extended. While returning back, you contract it. So on. That's how you generate motion. So your motion, so here what happens? Not mass, inertia parameter. That is basically moment of inertia. Yeah, mass remains constant, of course. Okay, moment of inertia is varied over time. So system is time varying. It's not time invariant. All right. Though mass is constant, the another parameter moment of inertia is varying with time. Of course, we know, if you do further studies or some of you are doing nonlinear dynamics, then you will know this is called a parametric excitation. So this kind of change might be coming from excitation. This kind of change can come abruptly. Some spring fails, or some springs parameter will change suddenly from something to something. So that kind of things can become time varying. It might not be an excitation. Likewise, let's recall your tutorial problem. We are given this. As far as I remember, maybe something like this. Then we had a spring and a mass hanging, let's say M2, 1, something like this, and some other things were there. Let's say this fulcrum point is on rollers. Okay, and this roller is moved by some velocity Vt. So what happens? Fulcrum point is varied. This distance is no more constant. This is, let's say, AT. This distance is BT. So if total length is L, then AT is equal to L minus BT. All right? Or opposite. Let's say BT is equal to L minus AT. So BT by AT is equal to L minus AT, L by AT minus 1. Okay? So it's not a constant. Now, if you look at the state space matrix for this, from its equations, A matrix. You have just now submitted assignment. So in A matrix, somewhere there was a term minus B by A. There was a term minus B by A. There was a further term B by A. Somewhere B by A. This is related to K of this. K whatever. K2 let's say. K2 multiplied with U2. Alright? And here B by A of course comes from here. Okay? So that is the force coming here. This will be the force 1 by M1 let's say. That will go to dq dot equation. So these two terms, these will become L by AT minus 1 or time varying. This becomes, this is not time invariant, but linear. This is a linear system, okay, but it's not time invariant. So what we require? The system must be time invariant. System must as well be linear. So what that means? That means for LTI systems, A, B, C and D matrices are constant. So what does it mean? For LTI system, A, B, C and D matrices are constants. Okay, all terms in that will remain fixed in time and they can be written in terms of matrices. They must be constant parameter values. That is what is meant by linear time invariant system. So is that clear? Is it clear? Or there is some confusion? Okay. So if this is what linear time invariant system, we will analyze this system in frequency domain. We can analyze in time domain. You have done simulation. That simulation doesn't require your system to be linear time invariant. You can do it for any nonlinear time varying arbitrary system. Okay. But these LTI systems we will analyze in frequency domain. Frequency domain means Fourier domain and Laplace domain. Both of them are frequency domain, but it will be especially in Laplace. That's because it's very easy to find the response of systems through Laplace transform and inverse Laplace transform. Taking Fourier transform and inverse Fourier transform is rather difficult because Laplace transforms and inverse Laplace transforms, we can just get those functions by looking at the tables. So far so good. Let's recall. Okay, what is Laplace transform? I have already taught. Laplace transform I am denoting by symbol L, pound, like ft. Previously I wrote small fs. Some students told it is different function, so I am writing capital Fs. So Laplace transform of ft is capital Fs, and we know what it is. Integration I will start from 0, not minus infinity. Formal definition is minus infinity. Okay. So it is 0 to infinity dt. This is called causal form. Integration minus infinity to infinity e to the power minus st ft dt is acausal. Because ft will be 0 for all t less than equal to 0, we will assume that. So it's same thing. So integration of minus infinity to infinity is same as integration of 0 to infinity. So in our domain, it will be assumed that signal does not exist before t is equal to 0. Whatever might have happened, that signal does not exist before t is equal to 0. That is what is causal form. So we have already talked about Laplace transform of Dirac delta. Dirac delta is, we know, okay, so this is basically, you put it there, it exists only up to at t is equal to 0 to plus epsilon, epsilon tending to 0. So e to the power minus st in place of t, you just put 0. That's it. Okay, and that exists only at t is equal to 0. So we get Laplace transform of Dirac delta is equal to 1. Laplace transform of unit step, this is Dirac delta. Unit impulse, Laplace transform of UST is equal to 1 by S. UST is unit step. What is it? UST is equal to 1 for all t greater than 0. Greater than 0 is equal to 0 otherwise. At t is equal to 0, UST is 0. 0 initial value. Laplace transform of ramp one by s square. RT is ramp. This is unit impulse. Unit impulse turn like this. Okay. Unit step like this before this 0. Ramp. This is t. So as you know, these things are derivable from each other by applying the derivatives formula. So we have straightforward derivative formula known to us. What we have? Laplace transform of integration of ft dt is 1 by s times fs, where fs is, of course, where fs is Laplace transform of ft, and Laplace transform of derivative d by dt of ft is equal to s times fs minus f0. This f is function in time domain. Okay, f0 and successive derivatives. So what we know is UST is integral of Dirac delta, implies Laplace transform of UST is equal to s times Laplace transform of delta t, sorry, 1 by s. Delta t is equal to 1 by s. Similarly, unit ramp is integration of ust, implies Laplace transform of unit ramp is 1 by s times Laplace transform of unit step t. Unit step t is 1 by s, again 1 by s, 1 by s square. So that's pretty easy. In addition, you will require two more things. Laplace transform of cos omega t. So this you may remember, you may derive. This is s by s square plus omega square, and Laplace transform of sin omega t is equal to omega by s square plus omega square. To derive these two is pretty easy. See one thing first. Laplace transform of e to the power a t. Let's say that is our function e to the power a t. What do we do? Laplace transform of e to the power a t. E to the power a t, we simply write that integral whatever it is, e to the power a t, let's say minus a t. I intentionally put minus a t, e to the power minus st dt, that we make a change of variable. Okay, so e to the power minus of s plus a t dt. Okay, so that you get. Okay, this is one Laplace transform of 1 into this with s changed by s plus a, so we get 1 by s plus a. If you do that integration, that comes 1 by s plus a. Now we can see, we can write cos omega t j omega t plus e to the power minus j omega t by 2. That we can write and substitute there in this. We will get this sin omega t. We can write likewise twice j. Okay, so this way we can find cos omega t and sin omega t Laplace transforms by using same formula. Okay, 1 by s plus j omega t plus 1 by s minus j omega t divided by 2. That we will get, simplify, we will get s by s square plus omega square. Likewise sin omega t. If you remember one of them, then you can of course apply that derivative rule and also find the Laplace transform. For example, let's say we know Laplace transform of, let's say, sin omega t. So we know Laplace transform of sin omega t is equal to omega by s square plus omega square. So ft is sin omega t. F dash t is omega cos omega t. So Laplace transform of omega cos omega t, that is f dash t, will be s times Laplace transform of sin omega t minus f0. F0 is 0. Okay, so that becomes s times omega by s square plus omega square. This side omega comes out constant, so this is cos omega t. So what we get? Omega omega goes, we get Laplace transform of cos omega t is equal to s by s square plus omega square. Obvious thing. Now let's take again derivative. Okay, let's say let ft is equal to cos omega t, f dash t is equal to minus omega sin omega t. So Laplace transform of minus omega sin omega t is equal to s times Laplace transform of cos omega t minus f0. Now what is f0 for this? f0 is equal to 1. Function at t is equal to 0 is 1. So what we get? We get a square by s square plus omega square minus 1. This side we get minus omega times Laplace transform of sin omega t. And this becomes minus omega square by s square plus omega square. Right. Omega will go. Right. Minus minus will go. So we get Laplace transform of sin omega t equal to omega by s square plus omega square. So if you remember one of them, you don't have to remember the other. Other will come directly by applying the derivative rule. So this is one. Another simple rule that you have to remember, of course, you know all these, that Laplace transform of e to the power minus at ft is equal to f of s plus a, where fs is Laplace transform of ft. So that's very simple. We have put it above. E to the power minus st multiplied with e to the power minus at, it becomes e to the power minus s plus at. So it becomes function of s plus a. Very simple. So for example, if I have to find example, Laplace transform of, let's say, cos 10t, cos 10t, let's say, cos 10t into e to the power minus 2t. So what will this be? So first we find Laplace transform of cos 10t, that is s by s square plus frequency is 10, so s square plus 100. So that is the Laplace transform. Then full thing, Laplace transform of cos 10t e to the power minus 2t is equal to, in place of s, we put s plus 2 by s plus 2 square plus 100. So you get s plus 2 by s square plus 4s plus 10, s square plus 4s plus 104. Okay, so that's as simple as that. So when you have e to the power minus at multiplied with a function and you want to find its Laplace transform, just find the Laplace transform of the function and in place of s substitute s plus a and expand it. That's the Laplace transform. And this same rule, very important, the same rule will be applied for apply this for inverse Laplace transform. Nobody is going to do integration for inverse Laplace transform. We will use just this table. So these are all recalls. Then let's again recall transfer function we have defined. It is the ratio of Laplace transform of the output to Laplace transform of the input with all initial conditions. This I emphasized last time. All initial conditions set to 0. Okay, this will be all initial conditions has to be set to 0. So if you have system with ut, this is my system. It has some output yt. Then the transfer function denoted by Gs or Hs or whatsoever. Gs is Laplace transform of yt by Laplace transform of ut with x0 equal to 0. All this system has x, system has states x. Okay. So those all x's must be equal to 0. And then we write it as, let me denote Laplace transform not as yes. Yes, tell if you want to tell something. Somebody wants to speak? Okay. So transfer function is Laplace transform of the output divided by Laplace transform of the input. It's not Laplace transform of output by input. You do not take ratio of two time domain signals and then take Laplace transform. No. It is Laplace transform of individual time domain signal output time domain signal divided by Laplace transform of input signal. That is what is transfer function. And I again defined it, remember in the last class, I again defined if ut is equal to delta t or unit impulse, then Gs is equal to Ys, because ut is equal to delta t implies Us is equal to 1. So Laplace transform of ut is 1, so that cancels out. So we can redefine Laplace transform as it is the transfer function is Laplace transform of output when the input is unit impulse, that is delta t, with all initial conditions set to 0. So is the definition of Laplace transform transfer function clear? What is transfer function?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So henceforth, we will draw these LTI systems in terms of a block diagram like this. LTI system block diagram. Yes. Yes,
So
yes.
can we stop? Can we stop for a short break, please?
Okay. Okay. Just 2 lines, then we'll take a break. So LTI system block diagram in frequency domain. We'll draw it as US or capital US, whatever you write. Here is the transfer function GS. Here is the output YS or YS, whatever you write. Okay. So that is how we will write the block diagram form of this in frequency domain. Okay. So this is 416, 421 then. All right. You can go for a small walk outside. Okay. So 421 we will rejoin. Ayush, can you pause this recording and then redo it, or you have to continue it?
No, sir. You have that permission to stop this recording.
No, if I stop it, how do I resume it?
No, we can do it part wise, part 1 and part 2.
Okay, so I am stopping. You remember to let me remember. Huh?